Welcome back to 420 Chief. Today's episode is another one that hits globally. Veterans from around the world are sounding the alarm and saying the same thing. We need better ways to heal. With nearly 68% of veterans being prescribed SSRIs that actually increase the risk of suicide, it's time we wake up. It's not just a national crisis, it's a global emergency. We need to reschedule and research plant-based healing and make it readily available to those who served. Today, we're diving deep into this powerful conversation with a veteran who's walking that path and helping others find their way as well. With that said, I'm going to do a introduction to Brad Moore. Brad, welcome to 420 Chief. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. I want to just jump right in. We've got quite a bit to cover today, and I want to try to keep the time the same for the fans. So, do you want to start off? Just tell us a little bit about your military history.
Yeah, for sure. I was born in kind of just above the Idaho border on the Canadian side, near the Alberta BC border in a small town up there. Like a lot of Canadians that went in and like when there's nothing, everybody signs up when there's action or war going on, and the rest of the time it's supported by people that have military families, right? And so my grandfather had landed on D-Day with the Canadian Army, and then I had uncles. Remember that movie with is it Steve McQueen, The Great Escape? About like the one about like and they're in that POW camp in Germany and they all escape. Well, my grandfather, one of my great uncles, was actually in that POW as a he'd been shot down in a bomber over Germany or something like this.
Wow.
So I had like four great uncles that were all in the Canadian forces and in World War II and Korea and that kind of stuff. So it's just like it was a big part of our family life, right? And so when I got out, I had a kind of a choice. I'd either like figure a way to go to college, or I'd go into natural resources, which was logging or mining, or the military. And I what I did is I came down to Vancouver and I did a year. I did basic training. I did a year stint in what we call the militia up here. It's the Army Reserves. It's a big kind of part of our national defense policy. And and I liked it enough that I went down to a full time recruiter and I signed up and went in there, and some old school artillery guy was telling me how I should join. He was yelling at me I should join the artillery, and I was like, "No, man." I was like, so I watched these guys. There's this thing where there's all these paratroopers were coming in and blowing the crap out of a building, and I said I want to go into the infantry, and yeah, and then so off I went, right, and I signed up. My kind of first stint was like for 4 years, and then I signed it's funny, part of my story is I signed this contract that had to go do 3 years of reserve time after, and I'd forgotten about that, so I signed up, and back in the day, you did 12 weeks of basic training, which was just everybody, and then you went and you did your trades training, then I went and did, 16 weeks of infantry battle school, and the way it works in Canada is it's kinda along those British regimental lines. Everybody goes to a regiment, especially in the combat arms. So I went to the Royal Canadian Regiment, and I was in the 3rd Battalion, and I was, got put into an infantry platoon. And from there, the normal stuff, right? Like, the first thing they do is they teach you how to drive an army truck, and then they teach you how to become a communicator. And then I lucked out; I got to go to airborne school, and I went to airborne school, and then I went to in Canada, we used to have the airborne regiment. So you'd go there, and then so I spent some time with them, and then ended up going back to my leg unit because they were going overseas, and it was just the way it works up here is it was understaffed. So I went there, and I went to Germany, and it was good. It was like Germany back in the 80s, late 80s, and everything was just starting to happen, right? Like, the wall was coming down, and for those guys, your listeners that are old enough, like, I just remember like all of a sudden, one day the Soviet army was there on the wire, and the next day they were all gone, right? And that's just the way it went down. And then and just did lots of stuff like that. Did recce courses, what you guys call recon, and just, it was good. And then what happened is a whole bunch of guys went to the first Gulf War, and then a whole bunch of guys went to Bosnia because that kicked off. And so went through all that kind of stuff, and then ended up, I had my release was up. Um, And at that point, I kind of drank from the Kool-Aid long enough and got out. And then, I go back to that reserve. And then I get a call from the Army. They're like, you still owe us another 3 years of like reserve time. So I had to, I turned in all my kit. I was all squared away. I was at university. I was free, but it was pretty cool. It was reserve stuffs, right? So you'd go in, and I was in an airborne reserve unit. You got to jump out of airplanes and hump a rucksack, but you also got to go to your own bed, right? There wasn't living in the shacks on a base somewhere. So I did that, and then a 2000. So that was 93, kind of was all said and done. And then 2006, 2010, I took a commission in the Army Reserves, just because the war was kicking off. Canada had like we were talking about. We kind of handle. I can't remember what year they took over from the U.S., but they handled Kandahar province for many, many years. And for your U.S. guys that know or don't know, we I think all in we had like about 160, 170, like just under 160 war dead over there, and then probably good couple of thousand seriously injured, right? So, that was kind of a big part of this cannabis journey I'm on now. So I got into the green machine again, and just as a reservist, a reserve officer, and got involved with recruiting and that kind of stuff. But it was, as you know, at this time I'm in my mid 40s, and I was my body, and my now ex-wife at the time wasn't, neither one of them were having it. So
Yeah,
there you go.
you went through a lot there, not just physically with being airborne and all the jumps and the toll that takes on your body, but
Yeah.
just the era in which you served and the amount of unknown that was going on throughout the duration of your career had to be, take a toll on your mind as well. So, what a time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool and weird, and it's you don't realize how weird it is until you get older and look back on it, right? You know what I mean? And it's like it was hard charging days. It was literally the days of, if you had a beef with a sergeant, you took your head gear off and you went behind and you sorted it out. But nowadays, nowadays, like, it's just not like that. It's different, right? And I don't think it's better or worse. It's just different. And so it was funny when I went back in 2008, 2009, like I had to learn to peel it way back, right? Like nobody needed an angry old ex-paratrooper yelling at the 19-year-old. So there you go.
Yes, I completely understand, and I feel that because as a Navy chief, even retired every year, with our new chief selectees, we meet back up. The retirees will come out of the woodwork, and we get
Mm,
together to help season the newly selected chief petty officers and work them, you know, over in different ways. And you can really see the the old retirees that are still yelling and cussing, and now they say, don't do that as much, don't cuss at people, don't call them cuss words, try not to yell
yeah.
too much. It's definitely, times have changed quite a bit, but I think even the way that wars are fought is is quite a bit different. And actually, we got one of our brothers here, 4 Points. He has his Canadian jump wings. He was Army paratrooper in United
It's
States.
awesome, man.
But
I
anyways,
didn't
so
get my U. I got my German ones. I never jumped with the Americans.
no kidding.
Yeah,
Wow.
no. Right?
So
You think that's weird? I got to go all the way to Europe to get an extra set of foreign wings. Well, I could have just gone down. I guess it's just down and across whatever that big base is
yeah, not too
down
far.
in Washington State. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit. So you were in quite a time, and when you got out, let's talk a little bit about that transition for you. I mean, we talk about this so oftentimes, and
Uh,
we hear about it on the news how veterans struggle, but I mean, just what you had been through and the time you had been through it. Let's talk a little bit about your experience with that coming out.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's look back in the day when you got out, if you didn't write letters, you weren't talking to anybody, right? There wasn't. It was just a weird time. Like I said, it was. We have, like, you guys have the American Legion, we have the Canadian Legion up here. It's a form of the British Legion type of thing, and I mean, there's guys from There's guys from the Korean War maybe in there. Um, and it's weird. I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. I go, man, when I went in '84, that was literally only like 10 years after the end of the Vietnam War, right? And so, when you think about that, if I was in the United States, there would be people that near peers, right? You know what I mean? So in my old army battalion, we had Korean veterans, like in it, like some super old guy that was working in the mess hall and he'd fought in Korea with the Canadian forces, right? But when you get out, it's kind of up here in Canada. And back then, our standing army of, I don't know, it was 100, people or whatever kind of deal, the military. And so it's not as small as a lot of Americans think it's, but it was like I just wasn't running into people. You know what I mean? And so unless you wrote letters, you're kind of on your own. And that I had a hard time with that, eh? Like I got out and I went to university and I was like super old and I played university rugby and I was all like, I started hanging out with these guys. Oh, you should come to a fraternity party. And like I'm like, shaved head. I'm like, I got, I've got that look. It's not super warm and inviting.
Right.
And I'm at a university and I was just like, I don't relate to these dudes, right? Like, like if anything, like, and then, put a few beers in me and then it can get rough really fast, right? And these are 19-year-old kids, like some of them, they're going to, a lot of them came from prep schools that, yeah, it didn't go over well. And so that was kind of the start of my journey, into the bottle. And it's something, and it's funny, I've talked about, I was just going through some paperwork, Veterans Affairs Canada, we call VAC up here. And like, man, like when I grew up, I think maybe I tied it on once or twice as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, with my buddies or whatever, and got sick. But when I got in the army and, after you pay your room and board, you got $1,000 and beer was 50 cents at the junior ranks at the mess. That was a lot of beer to drink, right? And they didn't care back then. Nobody was like quizzing you how many beers you have this week, right? Like it was just you better show up for work and be fit, right? Not be hungover and have your shit squared away, and every Monday was like a 10-mile run just to like shake the booze out of you. And so it was one of those things where, yeah, man, I took the gloves off, like the constraints of the military off, no consequences. And then just all this shit going on in my head, and it got bad and it got ugly for a long time. So about like 1998, when I got myself in some trouble, and I had to deal with that. Um, then 1998, I put the plug in the jug, and that started kind of. It was interesting because then I had to start looking at things, right? And so it was kind of like that. And it took me, you know what? Honestly, it took me a long time, Ryan, like to even kind of reconnect with military stuff. It wasn't until the Gulf or sorry, the War on Terror, and we had guys on the ground in Afghanistan, and then, the guys that I served with were like now like warrant in Canada, like it goes like sergeant, warrant officer, chief warrant officer in for the enlisted. We had all these guys over there and they're like dragging their old butts through through the grass and the gravel. And I started to feel that thing again and start to kind of reconnect with my military, who I was, right? You know what I mean? Because for the longest time,
Do.
I don't know, you just kind of want to get away from it, right? And you just want to be
Do.
free and clear of it. But the problem is wherever you go, there you are, bro.
Yeah.
And and so yeah, it's actually been since I've been doing this that I've kind of really, just locked up with my little brothers and sisters and Canadian military culture, which is it's pretty strong up here. It's like it's deep and it goes back hundreds of years, right? And so it means a lot to me now.
That's a lot, that camaraderie, that lost camaraderie. I find that so
Huge.
so many of us veterans get out and we isolate a bit, and we'll like you had mentioned, college, fraternity, they start drinking, and they don't understand that competitiveness and that ability to really tie
Wow.
one on and be crazy. Like, I would do the craziest things, and all my friends knew that about me, and they were like, "Oh, man, what's he gonna do tonight?" And I think that was a
Yeah.
part of the fun of having me tag along because I wasn't scared to fight, and I'd always do
Yeah.
some dumb shit. Like, I was
Yeah.
entertained for a lot
Yeah.
of people.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you were the we become that guy. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Not
yep.
great boyfriend, not great boyfriend material, but, good to drag along if there's gonna
Yeah,
be a situation.
not the best role model, and people look at me like, "Oh, you're so wise." I'm like, "Man, I made so many mistakes, like, I'm not proud of
No.
it." It took a lot to get me to learn, and it was hard. And you kinda touched on it, you said you get yourself into some trouble. It always takes such a deep bottom to realize that we're doing the wrong thing here and to
Mhm.
realize that we might need to reach out for some help. And I'm glad that you found your brothers and sisters in arms and found an avenue or a platform to get reconnected.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's been cathartic would be an understatement, bro. You know what I mean? Like, it would be an understatement. And what's really cool is because now I work with veterans on both sides of the borders. Like, we do work with, Bounds Veterans Network, we do work with the Grunt Style Foundation, we it's funny, we employ Israeli veterans, Canadian veterans, American veterans all work at our company, right? So it's cool. It's awesome, actually.
I would like to talk a little bit more about when you got out. Did you get help from your VA hospital at all in Canada?
Yeah, no, it was, there was, I, it's funny because like I had like, I didn't, no, honestly, it wasn't until like now I started dealing with it. And just because like, like I said, you know, drinking solved a lot of problems for a long time. It just did until it didn't, right? And then that was a whole different other road of recovery around that. You know, it's funny, I've always been kept up my fitness, but what I would do is like a lot of like, especially combat arms guys, I would just kind of, unless something was sticking out of my body and there was blood coming out, it didn't matter. Like it just wasn't real. Right. And so what happened is I just kind of pushed through it. Now I'm dealing with like, now I've got to get like a new knee. And I'm like, not even just like I'm 59 actually. And they're like, you should get a new knee when you're 75, dude, not like when you're 60 and there, but it's done. And got osteoarthritis. Because I've got those issues, I've got hip problems, I got joint problems, and then, I got tinnitus. And so I'm just actually, honestly, just dealing with that now. And believe it or not, what really kicked it off? And I would suggest anybody, I don't give a, excuse my language, I don't care what country you live in, but check out the Invictus games with Prince Harry. They were up here, and there was American teams and there was Canadian teams. And I got to tell you this, especially with all the kind of the crazy stuff that was going on. This happened in February and March this year, and the Americans are all chanting Canada, Canada, and the Canadians are all chanting USA, USA. It was just again, it was about the brotherhood. That's really all that matters. Doesn't matter about politics. It's about all the people that everybody. And I just worked as a volunteer, as a veteran volunteer, and I ran into a guy who used to be my platoon sergeant like 35 years ago. And
Wow.
he's all like, and we were talking, and I went through my story, and the one thing that's cool with my generation is what happened for us up here is, Facebook. All the guys come back from Afghanistan all start getting on Facebook and social media, right? And the coolest thing is that so I all us old timers, as I call us, all reconnected through that way. So I knew he was there. I didn't know he was at Invictus, and he was one of the team kind of leads or whatever. And he's all like, "You need to get your shit squared away with Veterans Affairs. You need to go there and get it going, right?" And so I was like, "Yeah." And my wife has been on me about it, and, I don't know, and, I think part of it always boils down to, like, honestly, it's part of that, like, there's a bit of shame, like, did I do enough? Should I stayed in? Like, just that fucking guilt that you feel. And so it's something that I've been kind of like on top of now. And, as he said, as we say up here back in the day, you take the queen shilling, you deserve what you did. You deserve to get paid for what you did. And that's, I found in talking with a lot of other veterans, sometimes that's a hard place to get to, eh?
It
Like
is.
that's a lot. It's just like you don't realize it, right? Like, but the best thing that's come from, and it's easier, I'll tell you this, and this, it's easier to advocate for other people versus advocate for yourself.
It's so much harder, just like writing an evaluation. I could write 25 of my
Yeah.
E5 evals faster than I could write my 1. But you're
Yeah.
right, and, just the fact that we're talking about it and hearing others talk about it, it's true, we deserve it, and we're trained to work through the pain, and it gets to the point where, so I've met a lot of my brothers and sisters that are struggling to breathe just putting their shoes on because they just been dealing with it, and they're not getting any help. They haven't asked for any help. They haven't gotten treatment. So absolutely get checked out because it's not a lot of the illnesses aren't even physical, like visible. There's a lot of mental issues as well.
And
That
you don't know it, right? Because what's happening back here isn't what you're thinking about. It's just happening.
exactly. But I did want to get back on track and talk about. Tell me a little bit about your exposure to cannabis after service.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, I mean, like after service, I grew weed illegally. I mean, it's like me and somebody's had a house and we had it all taped up. And then, it's funny. It's like, so we're doing it and up here where I live, like the Hells Angels are really big. And apparently they found out we had a grow house and we went home and we went downstairs and all the buds had been cut off. And there was like a Hell's Angel thing with a knife through it on the wall. We're like, okay, we're out of business, man. It was like,
Damn
yeah,
it.
no, damn fuck.
Gotcha.
It was, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but it was interesting because I was always kind of more like, I like the bottle, right? Like, because I was never like, for me, for cannabis wasn't until like this, my journey now. Cannabis was something that kind of mellowed you. And I wasn't interested in getting mellowed. I like the bottle, like getting jacked up, right? And feeling that until I stopped doing that. When I went into recovery, which was basically like doing AA and just like, and I haven't had a drink in 26 years. It was a lot of it was about like, I can't put things in my body that change how I view the world, right? It's not about pain. It's not about healing. And what's really interesting, we talked about this kind of pre-show. It's like when I got cancer in 2020, I had to make a decision, dude. Like, I had a form of colon cancer south of the border, and it was like I got 25 radiation treatments in 5 weeks and 52 chemo treatments of like oral and IV in those 5 weeks. And I was effed up. Like I was really, really messed up. And to the point where it's like sometimes like because what would happen, I'd pass out from the pain. And so like, and I tried to hold out for the longest time. I tried to be a tough guy, like with dealing with radiation burns. I tried to, and I was, so, next thing I know, I'm on T3 and Naxoprins, right? And then it just wasn't working. Nothing was stopping it. And, yeah. And, I went to the cancer clinic up here and like we were talking about cannabis is legal both medically and recreational, like with a lot of rules. Like, don't like this is not the Wild West up here. There's a lot of rules, right? You got more than this, you're trafficking. You don't do this, you don't do that. Like you go to a cannabis store, you can't see in the windows. There's no, you know what I mean? It's kind of it's I don't know what a good example it is. It's kind of like a highly regulated thing. It's not like a liquor store, right? Where you can't do ads, you can't do anything for it.
Sure.
So short end of it is I said, what about cannabis? And I'd always been this advocate of like, because what I was doing in the company. And they said, you know what? They said, Brad, I said, we don't know what to tell you. They said, if you have an adverse reaction, you're gonna end up in emergency one more time. And I'd gotten to the point, honestly, because of the pain, I'd like, I don't want the Canadian government knocking on my door, but I got a lot of guns, right? I got like 12 guns. And so I put my hand gun in my mouth. I couldn't take the pain. I couldn't fucking deal with it. It was just like, not wanting to victimize my kids by me doing that to myself. And then not wanting to be, basically in my mind telling myself stories, be a pussy, right? And so the short end of it was, they said, I ended up taking morphine, and I talked to some guys like, in recovery and stuff, and they're all like, it's really simple. You do what the doctor says. You're not a doctor. It's not your choice, Brad. You're not in control. Like, and so I told them, I said, I'm more scared about morphine than I am using cannabis. And they said, look, yeah, either way, as long as when the pain stops, you don't keep using it, you'll be fine. And that was kind of my journey with it. So what happened was I found a middle ground when I had the incidences that I needed to take it. Like at one point, it was like 60 milligrams of morphine for like 6 weeks, every day for 6 weeks. That's how bad I was messed up. So what had happened though is I was ingesting pills and a lot of creams, a lot of topicals, right? Like, and it got me through it. Honestly, I found something that worked for Brad. And you know what, like you and I were talking about, I just don't think anybody should have to guess at any medicine. Like, and especially somebody's, slogged a gun for their country. Like, it's not okay, dude. Like, it's not okay. And right now, too much of cannabis and about what we're doing about it, too much of cannabis is about guessing, it's not even, I don't like the term self medicating because you self medicate when you don't have another choice. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like I don't choose to do things. I don't like that term self-medicating in a negative fashion. I
Right.
think people self-medicate because they're trying to freaking heal. They're trying not to be in pain. You know what I mean? Like they're trying to like keep the bad guys at the door, right? Like you're not doing it because you like, oh, like if I wanted to do that, I just would have stayed on the bottle. Like it wasn't about that. It's
Absolutely.
always been about it's been about a better Brad, a healthier Brad, right? You don't go through all that stuff that every veteran goes through to come out to just fall into a hole and die from something else when you get through everything else, right? It's not cool.
And that's
And
one of the
so
stigmas that I'm fighting to break is that there's a difference between recreational use and medicinal use. And they
100%.
both have their benefits, but at the end of the day, if veterans find something that helps them with the pain, like in your case, I've heard this so many times. The pain is so
Uh-huh.
bad they no longer want to be alive, or the pain is so bad they cannot even sleep at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it offers them solution. I can assure you that's safer than any amount of alcohol that they're drinking,
Oh,
especially
100%.
compared with the medications that I'm sure that you had been prescribed at this point.
Oh, it was nuts. It was like the stuff and, like, I'm still dealing with it today, like, 5 years on, knock on wood, I'll get my kind of my 5-year scan and everything will be cool, but, you know, I'm still it's just like, dude, I went from all that chemo, which just boils you down to basics, right? You know what I mean? And then, like, right after that, like, 4 months later after that, I got, shingles, and then like 4 months after that, I got frozen shoulder. It's like, and then it's been one fist fight after another, and I get that. Like, I'm happy to be alive, and I'm grateful to be alive, and I'm grateful for what BC Cancer did for me. They're just wonderful people, and I'm grateful for all of it. But at the end of the day, I still carry, like I carry the weight of that experience, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, the whole thing is like it's like another thing in Brad's life, like service. I've been a dad, I've been divorced, I've been remarried, and I've got a stepdaughter, I've got two amazing kids. Everybody kind of, we're all like one big kind of family, and then I have a guy with cancer, and then it becomes part of that life, and I try to find this part of it instead of this part of it, right? And like I said, and I don't think the story is like uncommon to anybody listening or anybody who's been on the show and talked about it. We're veterans, right? Like we go into the military, we get unprogrammed as civilians, and we get repro that people don't even understand how easy it is to shoot center of mass. That's the easy stuff, right? Like 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 getting it up and going shooting the center. That's what they teach you how to do. They don't just don't teach you anything else. So when you come back and your life's been pulled apart, like it's a dog to deal with, right? And then you start cascading on like physical injuries, and I think like there's a thing up here, man, where I don't know what happened to that person and back, but they're all like, "Oh, you could do assisted." Telling a veteran they could do assisted suicide. Like, what the hell? Like, are you serious? Like that's the best you can do. Like that comes to mind. Like, and I know that's one of thousands of people that work at VAC, but that shouldn't even be on the books, right? Like, you just don't say that to anybody. And cannabis is this most complex, beautiful, wonderful plant that we know so much about, but it's kind of, as you know, Ryan, it's like it's everywhere. The information's everywhere. And, for the last 9 years, my whole reason is to create a better, actually, create a better outcome.
And so let me ask you, Brad, how did you document your journey? Like how did you figure out what regimen worked for you? And then for some of our listeners, can you tell them how, like your method of consumption and what your regimen looks like?
Yeah, so it's like I said, I'm not an ingestion guy. I'm a topical. So a lot of it boiled down to, I'll talk a little bit, if you're cool with it, I'll talk a little bit of what we do in the company because that's what
Yeah.
helped me establish it. So the company that I run we're actually the only company in the world that's actually got an approved patent application. So that's like the step right before the patent
And
for
can you tell our
using.
viewers the name of your company real quick?
Yeah. So it's called Global Compliance Applications Corp, and the name of the veterans program is called Citizen Green Project, right? Citizen and Green Veteran. You know, nothing fancy there. But the idea behind it all is that we actually have a patent for using technology to determine efficacy for medical cannabis. So anybody and this is not brain surgery, but anybody who's familiar with cannabis understands seed to sale software, right? It's used for how you register, and it's primarily there for one of two things: legality and taxation, correct? So the idea is, like, there's stricter growing controls on tobacco than there are cannabis, right? And we all know cannabis is, even as soon as it's harvested or cultivated, it changes until consumption, correct? Like, humidity, light,
Everything
all
has
these
a
things,
factor. Temperature, yes.
every everything. And so what we do, all we did is we basically put a version of that and we attach a consumer experience to it. And we built that all on a blockchain. Now, people hear blockchain, they think crypto. Yes, but we run our own blockchain and it's dedicated to the efficacy of medical cannabis and Citizen Green for veterans in Canada, United States. So we work with cultivators that register their steps for them to learn, and then what happens is it shows up and a veteran can give anonymous feedback. I'll explain that. And then what happens is, from that information updates the cultivator. So you just start looking at one experience after another. And then really what you do is you bell curve it and say, okay, if I do it this way and the guy uses it in this amount of time, and I put the water in zone 2 at this temperature and I harvest at this point and I get it packaged and it works better in this modality for this, for that. Then what happens is you start to, like I said, you start to get an average thing.
Yeah,
And
you see
so
some
that's,
guidelines.
yeah, exactly. A buddy of mine in special forces up here said even shampoo's got instructions. It's crazy cannabis doesn't. So my experience, even though I've done this, was very much like everybody else's, where I had to dial things in, I had to guess, because I can't look online and say, okay, for purple Kush in this modality, such and such and such, this is how you should do it. What am I doing? I'm getting anecdotal information. We believe anecdotal information is right. Believe it or not, your experience, any of these, whether it's Scooter or 4 Points Ranch or anybody who's used it, put it this way: nobody can say that their experience isn't real. So our experience around doing it is just to get an anonymous feedback and then bell curve the shit out of it, right? And then give that back. And then, as we talked about earlier, then we can take it to an HMO, we can take it to Congress, we could take it to our Veterans Affairs up here, Health Canada, because they need to do way better, and saying, here's a methodology to get a better outcome for a veteran. And what we do for the guys, people may not know this, but in Canada, veterans get, like, if you're qualified for opioids, you're qualified for cannabis. You have to get a doctor's prescription, but you get 3 grams per day covered by VAC, up and eight
Is
dollars
that
and fifty cents a gram.
Brad, is that an option you said? So if they qualify for opioids, they can choose one or the other? Is that how that works?
With a doctor's prescription, yeah, doctor's got to prescribe it. But you've obviously got more cannabis friendly doctors up here because there's no kind of, you know, it's not, once again, it's not as transparent as what you think, Ryan, but that's kind of the way
I
it works.
I think it's important for our United States veterans specifically to hear this because our VA doctors are not allowed to
No,
recommend it at all. In fact, I've heard of cases of where the doctor would take it upon themselves to cut off the veterans' medications if they told them they were consuming cannabis. So
yeah,
it's
100%.
so highly
Yeah,
stigmatized that even the doctors aren't aware of their own programs that are in place here. So I think it's great
100%.
to hear other countries that are making that an option. So I'm actually proud to hear that.
No, it is one of the good things that's happened up here, and like I think that, but there's a lot of work to be done because right now, like you work with people, and at the end of the day, 90% of it is still guessing, right? You know what I mean? It's still like, okay, so the doctors are like, how does the doctor guess? You know what they do, guys, is they look at a product sheet from a company who made it. And we all know those guys lie on their COAs at the best of
Well,
times.
just that, but they give out samples, and you'll take that sample home, and then you'll let your doctor know how it works. So they have guinea pigs in these areas, and I what you're talking about with your blockchain is very much independent research. People do go and
100%.
try it and let us know. Just like same thing with my book, document it. No, that way you know what works for you. This book is for me. Um, so I love that. I love what you're doing because it is about educating and informing yourself what works for you because we all have different endocannabinoid systems and they all work differently. Every person is different. And
Exactly.
what works for you may not be the same that works for me. I may even have adverse reactions. Like there are some terpenes for me that trigger my anxiety. I already have anxiety, but they'll make it a little bit worse. And I'm aware
Yeah.
of that. So I know I can document that and stay away from those strains that have that terpene.
Well, yeah, exactly, and that's one of the things we were talking about. So one of the things we just did recently, so 2 parts is, like, we built an actual app that allows people to give feedback and put it on the blockchain. What's cool about it is when you download it, never asks you your name, email address, or phone number. And the reason why is we just connect your phone through an Ethereum wallet, believe it, to the blockchain, so we collect no personal information. And what we did is in Canada, because it's covered, they just guys just give feedbacks on the product. But in the United States, we've actually set up, we work with partner companies. And what they do is they cultivate onto the, like, we have 25 million grams in California that are cultivated on our blockchain. And we create in our app an NFT. And an NFT is just a picture. And guess what it is? We use it this way. For an American veteran, it's a coupon, it's a discount that only it's available to you. So you can get it and you can claim it and walk in and get 25, 30, or 40% off or whatever. And what the cool thing is when you give feedback, like I said, we've collected no information. When we give feedback, it helps the next person. And one of what we just launched recently, and I'm going to send it over to you, Ryan, to talk about, is we just launched called Prescripti. It's Veteran Canna AI. So I spent a lot of money in working with the Israelis and a Canadian guy up here, and we bought all this intellectual property, kind of like the book that you wrote for yourself in 2018. And now we use terpenes as the, because it was a lot about terpenes are the measurable component. And so one of the things we've done is we've built this AI platform so you can walk in there and say, hey, I got this. And if in Canada specifically, if we have that product that matched against that those profiles, it can say use this. And if we don't, it says we don't have that, but we'll look into it, right? So what we're doing is we're based on 100,000 medical cannabis patients up here. We've taken a very good set of data. We've updated it up with more, and we keep building out. And we've got this incredible kind of logic tree that was helped develop. Some Israelis showed me how to do it using AI. And we did it in 2018, but it used to cost you 20 grand a month back then to use AI. Right now, it's much more affordable. And so we've launched this. So we're doing it in Canada, and very shortly we're going to release one for veterans. And it will basically the idea of, okay, here's your VA conditions, and it'll be like, here's ones where cannabis could work for you, and here's the profile of the product. And so just like you nailed it, right? Like I could, when I was growing up, we had these old school snowmobiles, and every time you got on one, you have to take out and you have to adjust the carburetor depending on the snow conditions and the fuel mix. So everything cannabis use is like you got to dial everything in, right? And our goal is just to create a better start point. And our goal is to help you in that journey. And our goal is to make sure that your anonymous journey helps the next guy and it keeps getting smarter and smarter and smarter. Like in a perfect world, um, like we'll have like, let's say 30 or 40,000 veterans across the United States and, and 20,000 in Canada feed back information. Cause I think then we'll be the only group in the world, Ryan, that can actually turn around and say, like, if this is what you have, this is a good start point to consider.
Right.
And say to the cultivator, like, put it this way: clinical studies are great, but they don't mean anything if you don't grow exactly what you use in a clinical study, correct? And that rarely ever happens. So all we're trying to do is create a never-ending kind of study to the benefit of the veteran.
Well, unfortunately for the studies in the United States anyways, all of the studies got their cannabis from the same places. They could only source the cannabis from specific universities. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that would be like follow the money. But I like what you're doing with having that much independent research to at least give some guide points. Like this, if not this, then try this. And,
Yeah.
a veteran could go to a dispensary, try it, say, yeah, that worked for me. I'm going to grow my own, and that's ultimately my goal is if a veteran, I don't think that veterans should pay for cannabis. I think that it should be covered just like medication. It should either be paid for at a dispensary or give the veteran a stipend to grow, a grow house, the seeds, the lighting, and let them grow their own. Because I found myself and so many others have found therapy just in growing their own medicinal cannabis.
Mhm.
And I like that you said you don't even consume, you use mostly topicals, correct?
Yeah. I use lotions. I use topicals. I've got a regime, and I work through it and I kind of record it. I feed back with my Canadian providers. I do the, I eat my own lunch here, boys. Like I go on and I give anonymous feedback on the blockchain, and that updates the AI, and I talk about what's working. So if I've got like a CBD, I don't have one around me right now, a THC stick or whatever, and then and I use that, and then I've got to use it 4 times in an hour to like because I've got shoulder bursitis to kind of dull it down. Well, I'm not going to wake up in the middle of the night and keep putting it on it, every 15 minutes, right? And so it's one of those things where like I go back and I feed it back and then I look what other people say. And it's a cool thing. This is a cool thing about blockchain. When you give a feedback and it gets posted live, it can never come down. So nobody can hide the results. They can't hide the outcomes. If they put their COA up, they can't hide it. You know what I mean? So when we put a QR code and it has all the information about that product and people's experience, it can never come down. So our whole thing is like, if you're going to be truthful, you'll be truthful. And I got to give it to my partners up here. They're all willing to step up. It's not the big guys. It's the micro producers. They're willing to step up and like put their money where their mouth is. And if something isn't working, they'll make the adjustment on it. It's cool.
That's awesome. And you did mention that you had some work in the United States. I want to clarify that's just in California for now, correct?
We've got two. So we've got Steve Peterson is Steve's in Ohio, right? And so he runs GCAC North America, which is kind of the US. And he's also the president of Citizen Green TV. I don't know if he's gone over it. Do you know about Citizen Green TV?
Yeah, have talked with Steve.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay, sorry. So that's really cool. So he does that. And then he also works. Then in California, we've got somebody who basically licensed the blockchain, and they are working in the medical space. And then for them, the subsection of that is, and that's the MTRI network, and a subsection of that is the veteran space. So anything that goes green comes my way, and then anything that goes like for example, he does a lot of work with first responders and uniform services.
That's awesome. And can you tell us a little bit about Operation Nubis?
Yeah, Novus. So Operation Novus. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in Canada, we call it Remembrance Day. You guys call it Veterans Day, and we just said, okay, it's 11/11. So I went to my guy in California, and I said I went to my provider, my partner provider up here, and I said, would you be willing to give away 1,111 you know, pre-rolls for November 11th, right? 11th month, 11th day for Remembrance slash Veterans Day. And I went and I said that day in too. So Operation Novus was kind of like the start of the Citizen Green. Like it was kind of like our, and we're going to keep giving them away. Um, we're going to keep giving them away, and we're going to hopefully, like, we give them away in California. We hit a veteran, and like I said, I have to go check on the app, but there should be an app, a coupon on there for American veterans. It's one of those things you got to be in California, but we're going to expand it as soon as we find if anybody's in any state where medical cannabis is legal and you want to like participate, get hold of me, please, because what we want to do is we'll launch Operation Novus in your state with you, right?
Well, let
And
me
you
ask you, what
provide,
does that look like for any of my listeners? Because, I mean, you've caught my attention. I'm in Missouri, and if, this can help get veterans a discount at a local dispensary or whatever just to try it out, I'd be willing to
yeah,
get involved. So what does that look like if somebody wants to help out in their state?
yeah, for sure. So if you're predominantly a cannabis cultivator or brand or a provider, and you have access, and you're willing to whatever the rules or laws allow you to donate. Usually, it's a sample, right? It's just it's just about language and all that BS, right? But what'll happen is we basically get the veteran to come in. They go into the app, they download, get one free pre roll. They go to a point of distribution, right? They transfer it over. So it's kind of a one-to-one thing for legality. The retailers love it, dude, because if you've got like, if you're a brand and you show up at a retailer's door and you're like, look, I got like 300 guys that are looking for a place. If you carried my product, you could be working with veterans. You see what I
Okay.
mean?
So this would be something that they would take to probably their local dispensaries. So I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
Brad, we could probably work something out if we could get a letter generated. I could probably generate something that listeners could take into their local dispensaries that would have all of this information on it, and if they're interested, and then have some, them contact.
Yeah.
We can work something out about that. Because that's amazing. I hear about things like this all the time, and then I'm like bummed out when I find out, oh well, that's only in California, because California's
Yeah.
good.
No, no, no. Yeah.
Our
Yeah. Yeah.
listeners
Yeah.
are nationwide. We've even got some in states where it's not even legal in their state. But,
Yeah.
for those that it is available and legal, one of my big things is, again, I always say it, I don't think that veterans should pay for good medicine, good cannabis. And I would like to figure out some way, shape, or form one of these days. My goal, if the VA's until the VA's got it legalized, is I want to be able to help out of my brothers and sisters in need. If they're out until they get paid, I want to find a way to get it to them. And so this sounds like one of those ways that also could potentially help somebody in a time of need.
Yeah, 100%. See, what's interesting, you'll find a lot of the MSOs will donate, right? But that's kind of like saying, I'm going to donate you the aspirin that works for you, and then I'm going to cut you off. So if you're going to use medicine, you need to have access to medicine. Yeah, you nailed it, right? One of the things what we try to do is here, this is what we know with most brands, especially in the mid-sized cultivator range and also in dispensaries, they all offer a veteran discount. But it's always weird. It's like, it's kind of maybe this, maybe that. All we're saying is like, look, like if you can go to Avis and rent a car and get 30% off, I should be able to get 30% off cannabis. Because at least it's something. You know what I mean? I want to see consistency in the product.
I would challenge that as 420 chief. I guess I would challenge every dispensary to make it a 22% discount because I want to raise awareness to the veteran suicide crisis and the reason that we're giving the discount to the veteran for their medicine in the first place. Because it is something, like you said, you went from having your weapon in your mouth to now you've got topicals that can help you live with the pain and then some. So why not just make it 22, raise awareness, and help out the veterans. So
That
that's
should that
that's what I think it
we've
should be across the board.
100%. And get this, like I said, I don't want to nerd out here, but if somebody's willing to do that for the veteran, believe it or not, because I run a blockchain, we're able to create like a token for businesses. And what will happen is if they do the right thing, we'll issue these tokens to them, and that will help actually offset, and they give even greater discounts, right? Because there's a whole ecosystem of, believe it or not, of crypto bros that are out there, um, that will actually buy that from the business and help, as long as they're passing that discount back to the veteran, they support it. It's crazy. Like it's called Citizen Green Vet Token, and it's for businesses because it's all this money stuff and banking rules. But so it's kind of like an internal reward system that we have to help the business to offset, because the business has got to stay going. But here's the thing, right? And I think everybody who's a veteran on this gets this. Like, you can, if you do right by me, I'll do right by you. That's the way it rolls with in the veteran community. Like, I'll talk to my wife about it. I'll talk to my friends about it. I'll talk to this, right? Like, if I turn around and I'm all like, like, I go to a place and they do the right things, I'll say, hey, you know what? I went in there and they gave me a discount. Um, and I'll say to my friends, you should check them out. At least they're doing the right things by our community. And so nobody, like, I think the stats in the United States is like one in every 20, like 20% or 25% of all American households have a US veteran in them. That's massive. Like, for somebody not to think, like, if I'm doing I'll do well by doing the right thing over here. So all we've done is, like, with this app, is bring all that stuff. Because here's the cool thing with an app: it's not controlled on it. It's because it's an app. It's thing, and it's like
No borders.
no borders, man. Now, you can't walk in if you're in California. You can't walk into Ohio, or vice versa. But that's why we use Citizen Green TV. Like, I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but like, a really cool dude. Like, I'm an '80s. I was in the military in the '80s and '90s, right? So, but Montel Williams, he's on Citizen Green TV, and he's like a 22-year Navy veteran. Dude was Marine and a Navy veteran, and like, he just does this incredible stuff. And to anybody that's out there that gets involved to help a veteran, we'll take your story and we'll pack it around as about your story, your business, and we'll give you advertising around Montel Williams episodes. And we don't have gazillions of followers, but that's how you start, right? You know what I mean? And so you give to a veteran, we'll give back to you, is my point. Between the rewards and the other stuff, we'll keep you whole. And you just make sure that if you promise a veteran that you're going to give them, if you're going to give them cannabis, and you're gonna give them what you commit to, and you give it consistently, right? Because, like I said, no, medical system is different up here, but we still pay for prescriptions, and nobody should have to chase affordability for any medicine should not be on the books, right? Like, I didn't have to pay for my chemo. Can you imagine that if I had to quality shop my chemotherapy? Come on.
Right. Well, I appreciate that's great information there. And in closing, Brad, what else would you like to talk about, and how can people find you if they want to get involved?
Yes, sure. Hey, listen, anybody, just I'm on. Shoot me an email at moore at gcac.tech. You can also, if you forget that, you can hit me up on LinkedIn through Scooter, and I are connected on LinkedIn, and we're on Facebook under Citizen Green. Um, you know, Look, it's really simple. Like, it's funny, like, um, cannabis. It's funny in my journey when I look at it, and I don't think my journey is unique. I think it's a pretty, take my name and swap, I'm not from British Columbia, I'm from Tennessee, right? My name's, instead of Brad, it's Alex, or it's Susan, or whatever, who gives a shit. And my journey as a veteran is similar. We've all kind of, you did things that just aren't natural to do, and at the end of the day, you just want to kind of get on with life and continue to enjoy your life, and not I don't, we have a preponderance of injuries that are not commonplace, both mental and physical, in the civilian culture. It's not. It's just not commonplace. Like it's just not commonplace. And I think that we just deserve the best care and the most natural care. And we're just on our side, we're committed to make sure that that gets done on for both American and whatever we do in Canada, we'll bring to the States. Whatever happens in the States, we'll bring to Canada. That's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Brad. I appreciate you for coming on and telling your story, and your story of healing and what you're continuing to do to help other veterans and spread this information. And it's been a pleasure. This was an amazing conversation. I can imagine we'll have more in the near future. So
Yes. You have to
absolutely,
come on our podcast and we'll get you on Citizen Green TV, bro. We got a
certainly.
live.
You've got my email, and I before we close out, for any of my veteran listeners out there that are on the fence about trying out cannabis as a source of healing, Brad, what advice would you have for them?
100%. Look, first and foremost, it's not just about getting loaded, it's about getting healthy, right? And while it's great that big pharma's got it all wrapped up in the packaging and the marketing and 80 years of, government check off, the stuff that happens in your body you can't see. And at least with cannabis, I believe, and I think that you'll see with cannabis, yeah, it'll take a little bit of work. Well, but there's people like whether it's Ryan or myself or many, many others that will help you through it. So, like I said, it's well beyond hitting a joint like you did in high school. It's well beyond that. It's scientific. All you got to do is there's like super advanced warrior societies like the Israelis been doing it for 30 years, longer than anything in North America. And you know, it can work, and it's going to take a little bit of work, but everybody I think who's in this industry is committed to create that better outcome. So don't be afraid.
That's
Just
great
reach out
advice.
and ask.
It's great advice. And with that, thank you so much, Brad. I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
vaccine close us out. Wow, what a conversation! If today's conversation moved you, talk about it. Share out the live. Share it out with someone who you think it might help or might inform or educate. Brad did tell us a ways to help spread this information. So I'll look forward to getting something on the website, 420chief.net, to help give some more guidance about that. But keep the message alive. Veterans around the world are fighting a new battle, the fight to heal. And it shouldn't be this hard. We need policy change. We need real research, and we need plant powered solutions that actually work. So, like I said, check out the website, 420chief.net, breakstigmas.com. Give Brad a follow on LinkedIn. It's Bradley Moore on LinkedIn, GCAC. Is that right? Let me see, make sure I said that right. Yeah, GCAC, Global Compliance Applications Corps. And when we speak up, we break the silence. When we break the silence, we save lives. With that said, lead with love, lead with change.